In today's conversation, you're going to hear us speak with attorney Stanley Tate, who focuses specifically on student loans. We talk about everything from the predatory loan industry to what you really need to consider before taking out student loans for yourself or as a parent taking student loans out for your child. We dive into mindset as well as really understanding what you're signing up for when it comes to these loans, and then his services around including your loans in bankruptcy and understanding the intricacies and all of the student loan forgiveness programs. If you have student loans or know somebody who is drowning under student loans, this episode is for you.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.
Hey, babe, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are talking about student loans, which I know is a very daunting, hair-raising, anxiety-inducing topic. And I know we've talked about it in the past, but today we actually have an expert with us. We have Stanley Tate, who is an attorney specializing in student loans. So we're going to get into all the nitty-gritty about what's going on with the landscape, what kind of services he provides his clients, and overall, kind of best practices about what to know before taking out student loans, how to repay them, so that maybe you don't need to actually call Stanley's office for help later on down the line. So we're going to get into all of those things because we know that this is a topic that affects millions of Americans. Unfortunately, we're not going to get away from it anytime soon. And then with this turnover in administration in 2025, I don't know what's going to happen. So we're going to talk to Stanley about that. Stanley, thank you for being with us today on the Sugar Daddy Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's get into your bio so that everybody knows where your expertise lies, and then we'll get into your first money memory before we dig into all the juicy student loan goodness.
I think, when we talk about bio, there's you could start with your origin story, like where you come from, or your educational background, training, whatever. But I think for me, it's most important to know I'm from Chicago South Side because that informs everything that comes later, just those lessons you get from there. But beyond that, graduate law school, been practicing student loan law now for a decade plus. Got into this area of law after practicing consumer bankruptcy for a couple of years and realizing that we weren't fully addressing student loan problems. And this is back in 2014. People would go through bankruptcy and still be stuck with student loans afterwards. And when I looked at the landscape of who was trying to solve these problems, there were very few people who had a focus on this area of law in particular. In fact, it wasn't really an area of law. And I was like, this is a problem. You look at the time, there were 30 plus million people and no one's really focused on, okay, what do you do with all of these programs? So that got me into it. I've been doing it since then, 2014, full time. One of the only practices nationwide that's all they're focused on is student loans.
That's amazing. I absolutely love that. Well, you just gave us the bio. I was gonna do that for you and read your bio.
Oh, my bad. I'm so sorry.
No, don't even. It's great. But I want to make sure that we cover some of that other stuff, that Chicago South Side that you just mentioned. I know that's very important to you. But what I have is Stanley Tate is a distinguished attorney specializing solely in student loan law, a niche where few venture, which is exactly what you just said. His unparalleled expertise encompasses the intricate process of discharging student loans in bankruptcy. Known for his practical and accessible guidance, Stanley has become an indispensable resource for borrowers of diverse backgrounds. A trusted speaker, he delves into higher education financing and legal automation for his peers. His academic roots trace back to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale for undergraduate studies, followed by a law degree from Thurgood Marshall School of Law with honors. So you left that out. You got to give yourself those accolades, Stanley. His pedigree.
It's not for me to say. It's for someone else to say.
So that you were doing my job. His pedigree also includes federal clerkships in Texas and Missouri. Stanley has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post. He's also been named a Missouri super lawyer rising star multiple times over. We just want to make sure we give you your props,
I never run it down like that. I sound like I'm trying to pick up some young lady at the bar on a Friday night, just running down my whole accolades.
I mean, maybe you don't read the bio to her when you're, trying to pick her up at the bar.
you, you know, people, they like to sell themselves, but no, thank you for doing that. It's sometimes it really makes me blush when I hear the kind of uncomfortable, because I just do the work in front of me. I don't really worry about the results or how it all stacks up. So it's
Yeah.
kind of cool to hear.
Well, we know that the best people doing good work rarely care about the accolades and care about the work and the people that they're helping. So we're going to put you in that camp. So thank you for the work that you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Before we get into all of those specifics, let's go into your first money memory because we are a financial literacy podcast.
The first real money memory and is I remember paying. I had got caught up in some type of criminal charge where I had to hire a lawyer, and I hired this lawyer, paid him $5,000, and to me that was like an ungodly amount of money at that time. But it was worth it because I believed he would make whatever the charge was go away. And sure enough, he did, and he did it in what seemed like 15 minutes to me. And I was like, wait, you can make that type of money doing that for that? And from then, I became focused on how does that kind of inform the type of life I want to lead, because I didn't think that world was possible. Everyone around me, they worked like you thought you had a good job if you worked a sunrise shift at UPS, right? Or like, so it's like that extra 50-cent interval increase. So having seen that and seen what was possible made me believe my world was a lot bigger than the south side of Chicago, that there were more opportunities other than being a postal man. No shade against it whatsoever, but it was just very blue collar type of work. And it wasn't something where you can get paid an exorbitant amount of money in exchange for the time that you spent.
That kind of goes back to the whole concept of it's hard for someone to become what they aren't currently seeing. And that's so important when you're
Absolutely.
young.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but for like a different world, but for that experience like that, where these kind of things start to compound on one another, you start to believe a world is bigger than the blocks that you trek to and from school, right?
Yeah. How did you go from this legal experience of your own to law school and like, okay, I'm going to become an attorney because apparently that's not what you had in front of you as far as examples. So that must have been a tough road in and of itself.
Yeah, it was, but you know, it was just setting out, okay, what does it take to become this thing, right? Like it was for me, it was never a question of smarts or brain power, it's just a question of focus. And once I realized, okay, to become a lawyer, you have to go to law school, you have to pass the LSAT, yada, yada, yada. And then I set off on that path, and that path, I didn't have the undergrad grades to do it. So then I had to think, okay, what else can I do? And I tried to find a job in the legal field. No one would hire me because I was like, oh, if I have experience, that'll help buttress my resume. No one would hire me. So one day I was talking to my boy. He was like, man, you know what? Why don't you just join the military as a paralegal? And I was like, I bet. And then I went down there and I signed up to the recruiter. I was like, yo, I'm only joining if I get to be a paralegal. And they were like, okay, let's see what can be done. And I was like, no, you don't understand me. It's not see what can be done. I'm only doing this if this happens, right?
Let me
And they
clarify.
saw I was
Right.
serious, and that happened. And then as soon as I got in the next year, I sat down for the LSAT, took the LSAT, deployed to Iraq, turned in my application to law school when I was in Iraq, got accepted. And as soon as I got that acceptance letter, I was like, oh my God, this is real. And I can do this. And then got out the military, went right to law school, and realized, whoa, this is a whole new world. And you gotta, the skills that brought me there won't keep me there, won't take me to the next level. Now I gotta learn some new skills here. But thankfully, it was just like that level of focus of, I want to do this. So what steps do I need to take in order to get there? Let's do that.
I love that. I don't know why that wasn't in your bio. First off, let's start there. Second of all, we just had Veterans Day, so thank you for your service. And I love that you had a friend that was like, "Go to the military, do this one specific thing," and now you're sitting where you're sitting. I mean, that's pretty incredible.
Changes the entire trajectory of my life. Like for any person out there, any young person that comes from a background that has, they're wanting for resources, I think it's a great opportunity to change your stars. It kind of fast tracks your progress towards things. So for me, fast tracks the progress towards changing my life. And it shows up in different ways because when I was in law school, people, they treat you differently when they find out you're in the military, right? And it's like, oh, you've served your country and you deployed? Oh my God, right? And they start making up hero stories about you. And you're like, dude, I sat in a sandbox in Iraq. I didn't really do nothing, but let's be clear. But they treat you like it's Hurt Locker. And I'm like, all right, cool. If that's what you want to believe, let's go.
Right. Oh my gosh. All right. So that was a whole story I wasn't even prepared for, but thank you for sharing that. And thank you also for sharing, that first money memory of kind of having a little bit of a run in with the law, because I think people listening, nobody's path is straight. And I think when you have these conversations and quote unquote people have made it, people think that you just were on this straight line and you had all the resources around you in the world. And I think that that's just not the reality from all the conversations we've had. And so thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that with us as well and
I
our
appreciate
audience.
it. I think it's super important to share those things because like people will see you today and they can't even possibly think of another world in which you came from. And I was like,
Exactly.
yo, this is like, I'm still trying to adapt to this world I'm in now. Like, I can't believe this stuff is real. But then it's cool too, because it's like, that's one of the beautiful things about being in America is that you can change your stars like that if you just apply yourself. And a lot of things go your way because some things didn't have to go my way.
Yeah, that's awesome. How did you go into student loan law? I mean, like you said, it's a niche. Nobody else really is in it. Take us through that journey.
Um, It did start off where I was a consumer law practitioner, and we realized that I saw that there weren't people solving student loan problems. But then there's a difference between recognizing a problem and figuring out that there's a solution that can be monetized. And so I set out to say, oh, I want to help people with student loans, but okay, what does that actually even mean? And at the time, there was one piece of material from this advocacy group called the National Consumer Law Center. They have a student loan Bible. So I bought that book, and it's like 300 pages, and I just read it back to front. And I was like, okay, I got it. But now you have the math. You don't have the art of doing it, right? You know the science. You just don't have how to apply it in real practice. And I needed people to kind of help me do that. And I started working with my bankruptcy clients, saying, okay, let me see what I can do with these student loans. But I still hadn't figured out a way to monetize it because it's like, oh, you could do a lot of this stuff yourself. And it wasn't until I was sitting in Jiffy Lube and I was getting an oil change, and I remember paying for the oil change. I was like, wait, I could have did this oil change myself. Why didn't I do it? I wanted the convenience of not doing it. And I
Mhm.
realized there were a lot of people who had with student loans an infuriating customer service experience where they didn't want to deal with it themselves. They wanted someone else to handle it for them. And I kind of made that pivot and that kind of unlocked things for me to say, if I'm going to do this, the way that I position myself is to provide a superior customer service experience for that person. And initially I was focused on solutions, but over time I learned student loan debt is such an emotional thing that really what you're solving for is how they feel about their debt, about their outcome, and their possibilities in life. And if we focus on that part, you're really doing that person justice because you're unlocking the future for them.
Mm. So we just had Adrian Hines on, who's a bankruptcy attorney, and we talked about that unsecured debt, the credit cards, medical loans, et cetera. But we did touch on the fact that in most bankruptcies, the student loans do not go away. And so would love to understand from your bankruptcy, background and experience there, what was it about the student loans that, aside from just the vast amount of debt that people are carrying, that people were coming to you for when it comes to that customer service aspect? Were they just not getting good information on how to do repayments or um
Yeah, kind of like what's your like what is the avatar that's coming to you for these types of services?
good one.
Yeah, the avatar has changed over time as historically it was someone that was in default. They were
Mm,
trying to deal with a private student loan. they were struggling with the student loan payments. So they have this pressing need that they're trying to solve financially. Over the last 4 years with Biden's forgiveness programs and kind of the roller coaster there, it's what the hell am I missing out on? Because I feel like I'm missing something because my loans have not been forgiven. And
Yes.
that is more of an analysis of, okay, where do your loans fit into all these available programs? And also, not just putting that person in the right position, but helping them find the signal inside of the noise, because there is a lot of noise out there. And they see their classmates or their friend on Facebook getting their loans forgiven, and yet they feel like they're in the same situation, but their loans aren't. And helping put in context what's happening, what the problem is, and they're not getting like great information from the servicer or the Department of Education. But I tell them a lot of times, you're not talking to a highly skilled individual. You're really talking to someone who is fundamentally different, like the same as the person who handed you your takeout order. They're just
Mm-hmm.
following what's on the screen in front of them. And this is the most complex consumer loan product in the world, bar none. But the people navigating that, the people piloting it for you, they aren't skilled.
Yeah, that's such a hard thing because with the clients I have that are that still have student loans, when I'm we're going over certain things and I'm saying like, hey, you do need to call into your servicer. I'm like, I know it's going to be a headache. I'm prefacing this. I know like
It's the
you might want to
worst.
do it twice because to make sure you get the accurate information, or we schedule a time where I'm on the call with you. But you're right, like it's just so hard. And from my experience as well, as far as like what I see, like a lot of people are consuming information off of social media, and I've only ever seen maybe one social media account that provides good, accurate information, and everything else is just like crap.
It truly is. And there's a lot of apples to apples belief comparison. And when I tell people one small fact can change the entire analysis of your situation, but we don't want to believe that. We just want to believe, oh, I have this debt. I've had it for a long time. It should be gone. And it doesn't work like that. And I want to say this one more time. This federal student loan system is the most complex consumer loan product in the world. You have all this interest capitalization with forbearance. You can change repayment terms anytime you want. You can consolidate and reset everything. You can take out new loans freely and add to that as well. And you can carry that debt forever. And it changes hands from servicer to servicer and details get lost. Oh, and by the way, we have all these different forgiveness programs that have all these other requirements and tripwires inside of there as well. How do you even begin to deal with this? I don't know.
It
But
feels
that's what
so
we aim to do.
complicated.
And
Yeah, it's so complicated. And like you said, there's so many programs. We all feel like we're missing out on something. Did we miss the deadlines? Why do the deadlines change so much? I mean, it's really, I mean, I understand why people just stick their head in the sand and say, I'm just going to die with these loans, because it almost sounds like the better option than to like face it head on and have these terrible conversations with people who don't understand why we're calling in. And I mean, it's really just a terrible system.
And it is. And I think the hard part is the people with student loan debt are often, they tell themselves, hey, I'm really smart. I'm good at my job. I can figure out all of my other part of my life. I can't figure out the student loan thing. And they begin to think something is wrong with them.
Yeah.
And no, it's the actual system that's set up. And you're trying to navigate this, but just kind of like Lord of the Rings, Frodo didn't just go on this journey by himself. He had to have, Gandalf with him. You need someone that understands how to navigate the system. And that's not like a plug for me or any other professional. It's just the truth of the matter is that this is not like your mortgage. It is not like your car note. Those have very simple amortization schedules that you pay off over time. This is the only debt that you know of that has all these different repayment terms, forgiveness programs associated with them. And by the way, different loan types depending on when you went to school. And if you don't have those right loan types, for example, there's a bunch of people who got left out of the public service loan forgiveness program because they had
Hmm.
these older federal student loans made under a different loan program. They didn't know that. They're like, I work in public service. I got federal loans. My loan should be forgiven. No, actually, you're in the wrong repayment plan. You have the wrong loan type. You didn't do this, this, or this. And yeah, we made it clear to you, but you're not thinking about that because you're just putting your head down, working, doing your job.
Wow.
Jess has no idea. I don't think she's ever seen Lord of the Rings, so
I know. I don't know what you just said, but
that one was missed on her.
that's
You have
okay.
seen other hero journey stories where the hero
Yes.
always starts off not knowing what to do, and some old dude comes along and is like, "Yo, just do this," and gives them the courage along the way.
Yes. No, I totally got the metaphor of like you're holding people's hands, guiding them into, the new galaxy of no student loans.
Honestly, it's the same thing with just like a lot of finances in general, because I have clients that I consider infinitely smarter than me. Like I have clients that are surgeons and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't understand this. I was like, well, we were never taught this.
Right.
So that's the only reason. It's like, it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to just do with, having access and now learning it. That's all it is.
Mhm.
Just focus on it, yo. Like, I don't understand a lot of things in life, but this, I'm like Neo. I just see the ones and the zeros. I know how to navigate this.
Well, it sounds like you're going to have a very long career in this field because student loans are not going anywhere. What do you anticipate for? I mean, student loans back in kind of our day, I'm going to do air quotes, there was a lot of predatory lending that people are still, trying to get themselves out of. And have you seen a positive change in the way student loans are made available for students coming in now, or like what do we need to be aware of?
Um, I think the hard part is, well, to answer your question directly, I have not seen a fundamental change in how loans are issued. If there's a
Mm,
loan product, if there's a financial product, there's going to be predators there, right? That's just the nature of the world we have set up. But I think what people truly need to be aware of, and where we have to have really challenging conversations with ourselves, at least from parent standpoint, is what are we allowing our children to sign up for? And oftentimes parents, they want their kids to go to the school of their dreams, of the kids' dreams, and that school may not be the best fit for them financially. They're traveling to a school out of state. Now they have to pay double for that education, right? Because of how tuition works. Then they are signing up for federal student loans and private student loans to offset those costs. And they have this belief that, oh, it'll all work out on the back end. But with the rising cost of school, where you have some schools charging $100,000 a year, there's no way you're going to see the return on investment for that education. And so, if
mhm,
you are going to go to school, you have to have a hard conversation about where am I getting the greatest value at. Um, and then for parents, I think also another thing they need to focus in on is parent plus loans are a huge problem, and parents just sign up for them because they're there to offset the cost of the child's education. But Parent Plus loans don't come with the same repayment options as other federal student loans. As a matter of fact, they come with the most expensive repayment options because theoretically you should know better as an older person about what you're signing up for. But you
Could you
don't want to disappoint your
sorry,
kid.
could you
wow.
quickly explain the Parent Plus loan for those individuals who aren't familiar with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way Parent Plus loans work, they're a federal student loan that the parent borrows on behalf of the child's education. And so your child will have an opportunity to borrow up to a certain amount for their education from the government. And whatever's left over, you have to either pay through private student loans, or if you're the parent, you can try to take out Parent Plus loans to offset that cost. And so this is a loan that is for your child's education, but it is legally in your name, and it's everything is tied to you as the individual. So it's not uncommon for me to run across parents who owe $300,000, $400,000 of student loan debt for 2 or 3 kids, and now they're 55 years old, and they're like, the payment is $3,000 a month. I only make $5,000 a month. What the hell do I do? And they didn't realize they signed up for it because it's kind of like frog in the boiling water. It just kind of heats up over time, and it's only when you get there you're like, oh, this is really a problem. And there's very few things that can be done at that stage.
Yeah, and it's hard because you have to have those hard conversations, like you said, as far as what is the ROI. And I kind of like use an extreme example where I'm like, we're located here in North Carolina, and I'm like, if your child wants to be a teacher, which is an honorable profession, but the reality is that you're not going to make a lot of money. You don't send your kid to Duke University to become a teacher because you're going to be paying, $60,000, $70,000 as a year, and they're going to come out making $40,000, $50,000. Like,
That
Doesn't make
is a
sense.
sad reality I see where people are over leveraged. I have a lot of social workers that owe $200,000. Teachers who they believe that their way to increase their income is to get more education, borrow more loans. Now they have a master's and a doctorate, also they can have an incremental increase. Now, thankfully, those professions come with public service loan forgiveness built in, but that means you also have to be monitoring those programs to make sure you meet all those eligibility requirements. And historically, that was a much more challenging program to take advantage of until the Biden administration came and kind of took a weed whacker to those rules to open it up for people. But I just think those are the real conversations we need to have is what is that ROI? But it's hard to say because you're 18, 19 years old, 17. You're not thinking ROI. You're thinking, dude, I'm going to have the greatest freaking future ever of all time. And I'm going to be able to pay this back because why not? But then
Hmm.
reality hits and you realize you don't really get your stuff together until you're like early 30s, mid 30s at the, roughly is when your life finally starts to stabilize. And as it does, oh, by the way, now you're in a relationship. Now you're buying a home. Now you're sending kids to private school. Now you have a nicer car. And it's like, wait, I still have these student loans. What do I do?
Yeah.
And you're talking to somebody who did a year of law school and is not an attorney. So I have the student loans from that 1 year of law school and nothing else to show for it. So I
Right.
completely
And
understand
that's
that.
that's a crazy part about it too, right? There are many people who go to school that should not have went to school, but only because they were told they had to go to school, that
Hmm.
now they're stuck with something from a bad decision, but it's following them like a bad ex and it won't go away. And it's like, damn, this is impossible. But I don't know that there's a better system out there that doesn't involve free education where we treat it like a public utility, where we say, as a society, we need to educate our society. Because if not, we have to have a federal student loan system or some type of Pell Grant system that covers the cost of education for those who don't have the resources. Because if we didn't have federal student loans, people like me may not have been able to go to school because how are my parents going to pay for it? Right.
Mhm.
So we have to have some system that offsets that unless we're going to replace it and treat it like a public utility. But I don't see that happening in our world here.
Yeah, that doesn't
Yeah.
make too much sense.
I know.
The vast majority of the world over has free or
Free
subsidized
education.
education.
Hmm.
Yet we choose not to do that. Also, people don't have the same discretionary income in other countries that we do here. So we are prioritizing capitalism, a lot of other things versus these kind of public goods. And that's a decision we make as a society.
Yeah, I have a cousin. So I'm originally from Germany. My mom's German, and I grew up there. And I have a cousin who's a radiologist. And I remember when I was at the College of Charleston, which is where we both went to school in South Carolina. Parking is really scarce, and so you pay an arm and a leg. So I was paying like $600 to park in a garage a semester, and she joked with me when I went and visited one year that her entire education for her to be a radiologist, a specialized physician, was less than, 600 euro. And I was paying that to park my vehicle. And, when you hear those stories, it just enrages you that people who, like you said, you're trying to improve your life, you're, trying to do good in the world, you're, especially if you're in that public service space, and then you come out of it and you just feel like you got screwed. I mean, it's just disheartening.
It is. And the fact that we are allowing 17, 18-year-olds to sign up for this incredibly complex financial product is ridiculous at its core. And yet, what is the actual solution here? I don't
Yeah,
know.
tell us.
I don't know that
Oh,
I'm prepared for a
I'm like, that's what
44%
you're here for,
taxes.
Stanley.
Yeah, but I don't know what the solution is because, like, are you really ready to commit to 44% taxes, right?
Mm,
Like, or higher as some of these other countries are. I don't know that we're ready to make that type of financial commitment to the betterment of overall society,
yeah. Well, I think in the
especially
US,
with a
we know
mistrust of
that we're
government, too.
not. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't think, I mean, when you have your healthcare system, that's a for profit system, and the prison system is a for profit system, and you have all these systems that should be, like you said, for the betterment of the country, for the betterment of the states, et cetera, like they are in other countries. When we're still focused on profit, 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 it's just never going to happen. So, how do we, since we're
It
not
was
going to fix the system?
Well, I was also going to say that, like, as far as when it comes to just building wealth, individuals who have large student loans because parents didn't have the money for them to pay to go to college, and had to take out student loans in order to better their lives. They're now even delaying the process of being able to build wealth because they're having these large student loan
They're
payments.
crippled underneath their
As
debt.
compared to
Right.
somebody whose family was able to pay for it, they get a good job coming out of school, and they're able to continue to add on to it right away as far as building their wealth.
Yeah, I think, looking at the rules as they are today, probably the most radical thing you can do as a parent is to be the martyr for your child and take out the debt in their name, and you eat it and give them the free kind of path of education. Or you knuckle up and you send them out of the country to go to school. Right? Because the reality is with Parent Plus loans, we can find a way to manage the overall monthly payment amount. And as you near retirement age, if your retirement is, say, like Social Security, your payment could eventually drop down to less than $100 a month, regardless of the balance. I have one client, he owes like $800,000 in federal student loans for Parent Plus loans, and his monthly payment is $57 a month, right?
But is
Because
he
there's
ever
no
going to come out of
relationship.
that?
Oh, he's never going to pay it
He's
off.
never,
There's-
but
Yeah.
he's either going to die or he'll reach the finish line of his income-driven repayment forgiveness. But his children are free to do whatever with their earnings, right? So he's carried that burden for them. And that is kind of like a crazy thing to think about, is that you foist yourself onto this debt. But that may be the best thing you could do in this society under its current rules. Because, yeah, sure, you can send your kid off to community college and you can send them off to a state school, and those can work. But then you're still, I don't know for everyone else, how do you truly avoid racking up a ton of debt throughout this process? Because not every situation is going to call for a community college. Not every system is going to call for that. They may want to go to higher education, medical school, post-grad degrees as well. And when you have a doctor and you owe $300,000, $400,000, maybe PSLF, depending on where it's at, or maybe you're like, oh, they're going to make so much money. But the reality is, all physicians don't make a bunch of money. Some do all this and only make $100,000 a year. I say only, but in relation to what they borrowed to get it. You know what I mean?
Right. What do you, I do want to hone in on two things. I want to end on a positive note and make sure that people hopefully have some sort of a takeaway of like how to avoid these disastrous situations. But when people come to you, and you've talked about your avatar changing, over the years and with the changing landscape, but when they're coming to you now, what is it that you're doing for them? I mean, we talked a little bit about getting rid of the debt with bankruptcy. You're helping them navigate these complex systems. Like, what does a consult or, an initial client meeting with you consist of?
Yeah, so everything starts with figuring out what type of debt they have, federal or private. If it's federal, they send us over a copy of their student aid file, which shows the entire record of things. And prior to the change in administration, a lot of that was just looking at, okay, of all the Biden initiatives, which one is going to benefit you the most? And for the vast majority of people, that's this thing called the one-time account adjustment. That looks at their time in repayment, forbearance, and deferment, and gives them credit towards this thing called income-driven repayment forgiveness. When people think about their loans being forgiven after 20 or 25 years of paying, they're referring to income-driven repayment forgiveness. And so we were looking at those programs and saying, okay, if you take these steps, you can get your loans wiped out. And over the past couple of years, we wiped out, over $50 billion in student loan debt for people through either directly helping them or through our newsletter help, etc. And yet,
Wow.
Is that like, did we even make a dent in the problem? Right? It's 1.6 trillion, which is an insane amount of number when you think about it.
Yeah.
But so we start there, and then we try to figure out what is your universe of options, whether it is focusing on a forgiveness path, focusing on a pay it off path, or if you have private student loans, which are much trickier to deal with, and you're not able to refinance, your interest rates are ridiculous, what a settlement or a bankruptcy look like to solve that problem. And we just go through those different paths to figure out what's the best solution for this person. Now, people think of bankruptcy or settlement as these negative things because they have quote unquote disastrous effects on their credit report or their credit score. But credit score is one of the most easy manipulated kind of financial things you can have. You can recover from it in a year, 2 year, 3 year time frame. But what about student loan debt that can haunt you for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, right? So sometimes we have to have that conversation where we're going to make a short-term decision to do something that will hurt your credit score, but will lead to a better path for you long term. And that's the tough calls we have to make. There are very few things that are instant. You're out of this. You're done with this debt. That's usually not the case for people. It's usually having a really tough conversation and saying, okay, what are all the things you want to do? How do we achieve those things? Because I believe you can have a lot of this stuff you want, but it's just a question of when it's going to happen and what are the steps we need to take to get there. And I think it goes back to how I even got into this practice is kind of how the hell do I get to law school? Okay, this is what I got to do. Let's work backwards from there.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Is there, for our audience who, might be considering this, again, we had that bankruptcy conversation as well. And we know that it can be a life changer, right? I mean, people think, oh, my
Yeah.
credit's going to tank and the stigma around it is terrible. But again, people are getting their life back through this.
It's a
So,
financial tool.
Yeah, let me give you a perfect example. I have um, a mother and a son in Chicago where the son borrowed $200,000 for film school in private student loan debt, and the mother co-signed these loans, and she has a house. And they
oh,
were struggling trying to pay the loans for 2 years. But then the interest rates were variable. So the interest rates went from 3% and they jumped up to like 12%. And now their payment's like $4,000 a month. And they're like, we can't do this combined. The son has moved back in home and he's living in the room he grew up in because they're trying to figure out a way to pay it. And they come to me and I said, you know what? Honestly, the only way out of this is bankruptcy. Now, people, their first thing was, I thought bankruptcy couldn't get rid of student loans. Kind of. Your normal Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 bankruptcy will not eliminate your student loan debt, but there's a second process called a student loan adversary proceeding, which is a lawsuit where you sue the lender and you say, this is an undue hardship. I can't afford to pay. And then people say, well, I heard those cases were hard to win. Absolutely correct. The law is stacked against you. However, this isn't a binary decision. It's not win or lose. It's win, lose, or maybe I bring the lender to the table to negotiate a settlement with them. And that's exactly what we did for this mother-son combo. We used that process to take this now 280 something $1,000 debt, and we used it to negotiate a settlement of $80,000 at 0% interest over 10 years with monthly payments. Now, is that like them
wow.
getting rid of that? No, but it is a clear path for relief. And they can actually breathe and plan for the future and save and do all these other things. But they had to go through bankruptcy to get there. And that may feel like a loss when you do it like you're admitting defeat. But really, it's probably the most powerful thing you can do in that moment to regain your life back.
Right. It's a life vest.
Well, it's also definitely changing your thought process around bankruptcy in general because rich people don't view bankruptcy that way. They have no problems using it as a tool to go ahead and
It's a
reset things
tool.
and protect
It's
things.
a tool in your toolbox, but we have these hangups about things where we're making these like moral proclamations about something versus what are all the tools available to me to solve my problem. And I'm not saying bankruptcy solves everyone's problem. It's the last tool I use because I don't want you to have to do that, but it is a tool that's out there to solve your problem, and it can be really effective in the right hands.
Yeah. We've now had two attorneys on our podcast tell us debt is morally neutral, right? Having debt does not make you a bad person. So we need to shift that mindset. And then also saying that bankruptcy is a tool in the toolbox, right? It
Which
doesn't make
which
you
is wild because
bad.
the companies you invest in, they have debt. They take out debt. And like there's a question just good debt, bad debt, and what does that actually mean? But I have clients on the fire journey and everything like that, or they're following a Dave
Hmm.
Ramsey type approach. But I think the problem is actually much more nuanced than that. And if you just take this all or nothing thing, I think you're actually doing yourself disjustice there.
Yeah. Well, in a disservice, right? Because
There we go. This service, we'll take that one.
you're eliminating a powerful tool in that toolbox that can help you see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, the
And
amount of people that like, oh, I'm gonna grind my way out of this thing, and now you done spent,
not
six,
at
seven
12%
years.
variable interest.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm like, man, bro, you could just been done with this if you done this thing right. But I
Right.
also understand the value of having done the work and you get to tell yourself, I did this. I think there are much more effective ways to get that type of therapy that you need.
Yes. Well, and two, how long is it going to take you, right? What's on the other side of this that is your energy is drained. This is a constant thing on your mind. You're losing sleep. You aren't enjoying, the money that you are making because you're just throwing it at your student loans hoping that they're going to go down, and we know when the interest is compounding on a daily rate, you're never going to come out from under it.
I mean, it comes down to that mindset where people are like, "Oh, I took out this debt.
It's my
It's my
responsibility.
responsibility to pay it." And they look at it as a lack of their self character, not being able to pay it back, even though the odds were stacked against them to begin with.
Well, and like you
Yeah,
said, Stanley, you're 17, 18, 19 years old. You don't understand the loan you just took out. Your parents don't understand you took the loan that they just took out. I mean, it's just awful.
absolutely. But, there is value in a society that says, I incur this obligation and I'm going to honor this obligation. And I
Yeah.
think that's 1000% true. That's how we should look at these things. But at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, wait, what did I sign up for? And what is my likelihood of actually being able to tackle this problem on my own, given my income and given what's stacked against me? And there are few people that actually really understand how much of the student loan payment is going towards principal
Oh
and
my
how much was
gosh.
going towards interest. I had a couple that met with me the other day. They were making payments of $3,700 a month towards their student loan. Of that, only $300 was going towards their principal. And they're like, wait, how long we keep doing this? They're in their 60s, the peak of their earning potential, and they're about to retire. They're like, we can't keep this up. Yeah, no, 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 duh. Like, you can't. But you're trying to do the right thing, and I respect that. But we have to look at what's on the other side. What is the long term plan here? And those are hard conversations to have with people, but I really enjoy having them because over time, as I shared with you, I learned that it's not really the solution is not what people are really looking for because they already kind of have an idea what that solution is. What they're really they're looking for someone to solve that emotional thing that tells them you're not stupid, you're not a bad person, you didn't do the wrong thing. We just have to figure out how do we deal with this impossible problem and put you in the best situation possible to live your dreams because all those things can happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about that because for anybody listening, I mean, that is dealing with like soul crushing student loan debt, we're going to link all of the ways to get in touch with you and your
Yeah.
office in our show notes. But for people listening who are like, oh, my kid's a couple years away from college, how do I avoid this? What would you say to parents or grandparents or even people who are going to be putting themselves through college about
Yeah.
student loans, what to know, what to look for so that they don't end up in this position?
Well, I think you should always look towards federal student loans first. But before we get into borrowing, I think if you're a couple years out, you have an opportunity to do a 529 plan, great. We'll do those, max out your other benefits, and really take a hard look at whether or not school is right for you right now. What is it that you're getting out of it? You have to have a much more challenging conversation about what am I going to school for? Am I actually going to take this seriously now? Or am I just kind of exploring because I don't know what the next thing is for me? And I'm really using this as a transitional phase. And that's a very costly phase to go through. So I would have that discussion first. Then once I nail in, okay, no, this is for me. Okay, what degree am I going for? Okay, I want to do this as a career. I think what can I expect to earn over the next 10 years upon graduation? Is this the right school for me to go to maximize my odds of that, right? How much is that school going to charge me? Okay, great. Once I know all those things, then I can make a better kind of understanding of is this the right decision for me? Because too freely we just focus in on I like this dorm, I like this school, my friends are going there. And that's not a good decision to go to school at all. It's such a huge financial commitment that you really have to look at what am I doing? Now, I start off by saying federal student loans is the way to go, only because in the side of this complex student loan problem we have, it's only complex because we have so many different repayment options and so many forgiveness programs. And so you may be able to leverage those to your benefit, especially early on when you're graduating, your income is not stable. Income driven repayment plans are great. They will let you pay what you can truly afford to pay. Private student loans won't let you do that. They're going to want their money. They're like Family Guy. They're like Brian beating up on everybody, like, where's my money? Where's my money? Where's my money? And so it's like, that's how it goes. So choosing federal is the way to go because it has greater flexibility. That comes at a difference of your interest rate may be higher than what you can get from the private market, but that kind of difference, I think, is worth it to you because you're getting greater options of repayment. And so that's how I look at it. I think very few people should do private student loans because often you're not going to have the flexibility you need to be able to pay that debt back because they're going to want their money immediately.
Yeah. Those are great call outs. We talk a lot about college isn't for everybody and every career doesn't require a degree, and there's so many studies coming out now too that talk about which careers legally actually require a degree versus a license versus certifications. And then we also just recently had a conversation with somebody who focuses on the PMP for her clients, so getting that uh, professional project management experience and that certification, because she, with an MBA, was getting passed up by people for promotions that didn't have a college degree but got their PMP. And so what you said about, exploring, well, what do you want to do? What's going to be that ROI? What does this look like in 10 years? I think not enough people are having that conversation with their children because they also want to be the ones saying, "Oh, my kid goes to this college," right? And it's like, "Oh, they're doing the right thing. They're in
There's
college."
some brand like association that you want to happen, and it makes you feel like you did a good job as a parent. You want to be in
Yes.
church on that Sunday where your kid is shouting up and my baby went to Harvard, right? And I
Harvard.
get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. That said, I think the cost of those things are so great. Let me ask you,
Mhm.
do you plan on like sending your kids to college right away after high school?
So,
So
so we have 529s for them. And we're very much of the mindset. I mean, like, our daughter's a very creative person. I mean, our son is 5, so who knows? But we're very much of the mindset of we're going to talk to them about all of those things, right? You're not just going to go to school because your bestie's going there. You're not just going to pick a college. I mean, I picked my college because my best friend was there and I liked the campus. So you totally hit the nail on the head, right? I didn't go because I knew what I wanted to do with my life and I knew which degree program. And I mean, I had a total breakdown 2 weeks before graduation because I literally was like, what am I going to do with my life? And so we are very flexible and open with, hey, if you want to work, get that work experience, get that customer service experience, understand how projects work, get your feet into the workforce if you're not prepared to be in school and you don't know what that path is going to be for you, because we're not here to just waste money.
yeah, I think the conversation is going to be a lot more nuanced. So, like, for like a little bit of background, my mom is a college professor, so the idea of me going to college was, not
No
even a second thought.
options.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to college, and I think the landscape has completely changed because I think our generation was told that, hey, you go to college, you're good, you're going to have a good job, you don't have anything to worry about, and we obviously know that's not the case. So when it comes to our kids, I think I think you're gonna have to see a change in how much school costs because it can't keep going up the way that it is because people are going to stop going because they're not going to get that ROI. So I think it's definitely having a more nuanced conversation as they get older and like, what is it that you see yourself doing? Like, what I think
And do you need a degree
yeah, do
for
you need a
this?
degree to do it? Or like, I think I heard somebody say like, start asking your kids like, what problems in the world do you want to solve? Not what do you want to be when you grow up?
Or
Because the
what
reality is that
degree do you
probably the
want?
job that our kids are going to have doesn't exist at this
Yeah,
point in time.
I
So
thought a lot about that because I have a 2-year-old now, and I meet so many people that take out debt, and I wonder what would my advice truly be. And I think where I'm at least today, is that I'd want to give my kid as many problems to solve as possible along the journey so they encounter different problems to solve and find out, oh, I like this thing. And also, if you learn to solve problems, you can pretty much do whatever you want in this world. The degree
Exactly.
part doesn't actually matter, right?
Yeah.
Because when we look at things, a lot of professionals I meet, all they're really good at is solving problems. Like, you give them a problem, they find the resource to solve it. And I value those things. So
Yeah.
should someone, you're saying, oh, I'll talk to my kid about going to school or not. And you're also saying what there may not be the jobs tomorrow as they are today. Like, what's the future look like? Man, and I feel like my conversation has been a lot of doom and gloom of part like student loan debt. It's a bad thing, but I think at the end of the day, I do believe in the quality of education. I just think, and kind of the worthwhile value it gives you. Going away to school and living in the dorms is the most transformative thing you can have for yourself sometimes. And like learning that independence, especially like now with kids who are like have helicopter parents over them at all time and don't give them the independence to walk around. Like the idea of a kid just being gone at 10 years old all day is like wild. And yet, would I want that for a kid? Only within the context of they have something they can truly afford to pay back, that they're not hamstrung. And that may
Yeah.
mean that they need to sacrifice on the schools they go to. They may not know what degree path they want, but they know what, as you said, what problems they want to solve in this world. And how do you get them prepared for that? Tough questions, bro.
It's
Yeah.
Tough
very interesting you
questions.
say that because I think one of the biggest things I took away from going to college was the experience of like, my freshman year living in a dorm with like 6, 7 other guys that like were all different people from all different backgrounds. And we had to figure out how to interact with each other and get along with each other to a point where we don't need to be best friends, but we are living in close
Yeah, we just
quarters
don't need
and
to
we
be on
need,
Lord of the Flies either.
Yeah.
yeah.
We need to coexist.
So
Yeah.
like understanding all the differences and nuances because luckily I was in a scenario even with our college not having a ton of black people. I had another black guy in my dorm, but we were one of like 7, and we were the 2 out of the 7. So I had a roommate of mine who only like basically only went to school with one black kid before because he went to private school. So navigating those different nuances is life changing. In regards to
But you
dealing
can
with the
get that.
world.
You don't have to get $200,000 in debt to
Oh
do that, right? You can
no.
do that, working outside of the home as well and getting your feet wet in that job experience as well. I mean, but again,
Yeah,
that
I think the
intentionality.
hardest part, the one hard part to replicate is the idea of extricating yourself from your neighborhood and your family that you're familiar with and going to a totally new world and
Yeah.
then trying to figure out how to survive there. And there's so much value in that part. And I don't know how
Hmm.
you actually replicate that in the job world where like, oh yeah, sure, but you still live at home or you live in the neighborhood you grew up in. You're not really
Yeah.
associating with different people. And the only way I can think of is like,
Military.
military,
Military.
Yeah.
Yeah.
AmeriCorps, Peace Corps type situation, some type of
Hmm.
mission or whatever. And I think there's real value in those type of programs. Um, or if you're going to send your kid to school, I think strongly encourage you to look to study abroad um, in those schools. And there's so many ways to do that. Now that's scary as hell because we don't like sending our babies someplace that we can't get to within a car drive. I get that, but like, if you're trying to set your kid up for success, I think we really have to look at what we're actually like signing them up for with school overall in our current
Yeah.
system.
No, that's a great call out. I love that. Um, Stanley, this has been a great conversation. You were going to say something.
Well, thank you. I'm like over here deep in thought, just thinking about,
I know.
man, how do I actually feel about all of this? Because
So deep
these are
in
really
thought, my
tough
headphones came
problems.
off.
Yeah, these are really tough conversations to have. And usually I'm not on the front end of the conversation. I'm on the back end trying to solve a problem that already exists. And so thinking about the front end is refreshing. But man, there aren't any great answers.
I think it's also very hard because I think a bulk majority of the population, when like for example with the parent, is that they're trying to provide a better life for their child. So they don't know this because they haven't experienced it firsthand. So in their mind, they're just thinking best school, that equals the best opportunities.
And
And
whatever it takes.
that's not necessarily the case.
Hmm.
Nah, man, I got my bonus daughter goes to a damn private school that costs $32,000 a year, bro. Like,
And
and
what grade
she
is she
is in
in?
fifth grade. Fifth grade. Why? Because her father believes that that's going to set her up the trajectory to make it to the school that he ultimately wants her to go to, which is an Ivy League institution. I don't know that means that the return on investment there is going to demonstrably increase your odds, right? Like to making it happen.
I'm
Or
not
can you
gonna
just take
lie.
that money and hire a private tutor and get some other stuff going on?
In my mind, as the financial advisor, I'm thinking like 30 plus $1,000 a year. Why don't you just put that in an account and it grows compound interest, and she's going to be a multimillionaire beforehand, and she can write her own path.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the problem that person may be trying to solve,
Yeah.
though, right? Like
Yeah,
a lot
true.
of times, my child went here, and that's what we're really trying to solve, not actually financial success or that security there. And that's so tough about all of this. I don't know that we're actually clear on what thing inside of us we're trying to solve as we go on this journey, which is much more deeper, kind of this ephemeral question that we have to answer.
I think for people of color, there
Yeah.
is definitely that extra, like, I want to prove that I belong as well. So, trying to go to some of these institutes.
Bro, you know what's wild is how many times has anyone asked you like where you went to school at?
I mean, maybe right out of college, when you're like early
Exactly.
20s.
Like, oh, your professional journey. Can you solve my problem? Yes or no? That's all anyone
Right,
cares about.
right. Yeah, nobody's
Do you
like,
look
"Oh,
like
where
the
did
person who can
you
solve
go
my
to
problem?
school?" Right. Nobody's asking where you went to
Yeah.
school before asking, "Can you solve my problem?" It's so
Yeah.
true.
No one's like, did you graduate with honors? Were you on law review? None of that stuff comes up. Did you do these clerkships? My clients don't even know what the hell clerkship means.
Most
So
people
it's
don't know
Right.
what law review means.
right. You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
but that's the thing is like, what problem are you actually trying to solve and get clear with that? As a parent, are you really trying to solve something inside yourself where you felt like you didn't perform up to where you wanted to go or achieve your dream, so now you're pushing that on your child? Or do you feel like you're being a bad parent because you tell your child, no, you can't go to that school for these financial reasons that I'm trying to protect you from?
Mhm. Yeah, those are
That's
questions
what I'm
we're
saying. These
not
are
going to
tough
be able to
questions.
answer. I know we're not going to be able to answer that on the pod, but I think what I'm hearing is you need to, especially as a parent, you need to have some introspection of why do I want my child to go to this institution? What is it actually going to cost? And what is the ROI in the long run? And then understanding if your child is not ready, if they're not committed, if they don't understand what they want to do with their life, right? Like, do we need to go and get a business degree or a communications degree? Or do we just need to go and get some work experience or some life experience, and making sure that we're not putting these pressures on the kids to have it all figured out by 19, 20 years old, because it could end up costing you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have my stuff together till I was 26, 27, and by together, enough to kind of understand what I wanted to do with my life.
Mhm.
And that was later in life. I didn't truly have everything together till maybe 35. But, some things happened in my life recently where I learned, oh, I'm still on a journey of figuring out my life at 44 years old. So,
Yeah.
like, I don't know that we
It is a
truly ever.
journey. It is a journey. And that's okay. I think if we show our kids that, like, you don't have to have it all together by your early 20s and that most of us didn't, I think that's probably very comforting to them. So, but this analysis of understanding what do these loans really mean for their future or your future as a parent, I mean, those are vital conversations and thoughts that people need to have before signing on that dotted line.
Do you find that you talk to your friends about this type of stuff, about school
We
and how
do.
they think about it?
We do.
We do.
I think we're the
Oddity.
odd, yeah, we're the odd ones though, because we really are trying to understand how people feel about it. We
Yeah.
have kids, we have friends who have kids in college, and we also have friends who have toddlers,
We're at that weird age.
younger than our kids. And so you're kind of in that mix of like, do you have a 529? How did you pay for college? Oh, the grandparents are covering like everybody's kind of in a different boat, but opening up the
Right, but, like,
conversation,
so that's
we
the
do.
financial consideration part, but,
Yeah.
like, just the conversation about what's driving the kid to go to school or what's driving you to want them, uh, do you find
We
that you're
do.
able to have those conversations, everything kinda transactional based?
We have both of those. Only reason I would say that's because, as I can speak to myself as far as being fortunate enough that college was, like I said, it wasn't even a second thought. I was going. My mom paid for, I had some scholarship money, but my mom paid anything else for me to go to college. So that wasn't an issue at all. And I understand as someone who was privileged that college is not the end all be all, and that you need to figure out what it is that you want to do and what that looks like and what it takes to get there. Because I always say, I've met extremely intelligent people that have just a high school degree, maybe barely got out of high school. And I met people who have doctorate degrees that are idiots. So there's no direct correlation.
Yeah. Well, and even for your career now, you don't need to have a bachelor's degree to get your licenses.
Technically, no.
And so have any of your clients ever said, well, where did you go to college?
No.
Right. Because again, nobody cares. And
But
you're
they also
solving their
assume, they
problem.
also kind of just assume you went to college.
Yeah. But No, I mean, I think it's important to have those conversations of like looking inside yourself and being like, well, am I trying to maintain this legacy? Am I trying to get the shout out at church on a Sunday that my kid goes to Harvard? Whatever it is, I mean, figure out what it is and why that's important to you. And is it going to actually be worth it in the end?
Yeah, that's the thing. I just wonder how those conversations go, especially as we become more and more siloed in our relationships through COVID and beyond, where we may be needing to get back out there and starting to engage more and have these type of conversations. Because I'm hoping we have moved past the you need to go to college because that's what's next after high school part, and having a much more exploratory conversation about, okay, what do we need to do? Because
Mm-hmm.
dude, this is like the problem with student loan debt. It might as well be tobacco with the skull and bones on the package at this point. Like, you know what you're signing up for, like, is a sentence of pain. So what are you going to do about it? How are you going to help mitigate these things? I wonder how people are having this conversation, because I
Yeah.
don't have them. Um, the people in my kind of direct path, they are generally sending their kids to legacy institutions. And so I went there. My kid will go there to Duke or to Hampton University or to Howard or to Penn, right? And there's not a thought of it other than that's what's going to happen because that's what's supposed to happen. Also, like, we're supposed to summer in the Hamptons, which is wild that I know people that summer in the Hamptons. So whatever. This is like a crazy life journey.
Oh my gosh, Stanley, we could talk to you for hours. This has been a really great conversation. Hopefully, people are going to walk away from this conversation having those thoughts, especially if they have younger children about, well, why is it that I want my child to go to this school or that school or college at all, et cetera. So hopefully you have sparked that thought in our audience. And thank you for being a resource to people who are struggling under this, crushing student loan debt, and you're helping give them the much needed resolve that people are not finding. So thank you for the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. I hope your audience can get through the unstructured nature of this conversation and pierce through kind
Love
of
it.
the mental model of it all, which is, I think that's the more valuable thing. We want a checklist of stuff like do this, do this, do this. But I don't think this problem is one of those do this, do this. It's not a step. It's really kind of thinking through, what problem am I actually trying to solve here? And what is the most efficient way to get it done?
Yeah. Thank you so much for walking us through that.
Thank you for having me.
Sugar Daddy Podcast, yo. Learn how to make them pockets grow. Financial freedom's where we go. Smart investments, money flow.